Hi, I'm Jason Miller. I'm a freelance graphic designer based in London. I specialise in brand identity design, and I throw in just a pinch of front-end web design for good measure. I have a particular focus on luxury brands, and I really enjoy what I do. So this class is designed to help anyone looking to start their journey as a freelance graphic designer. So whichever route you've taken up until now, perhaps you've come from working as an in-house designer, maybe you've worked at an agency, perhaps you've just finished a course at college or university, maybe you've self-taught yourself graphic design. Well, whichever route you've taken until now, really this course is designed to help you start your freelance career successfully. This video is designed to answer some of the questions that just believing in yourself isn't going to answer. You do need self-belief, but you'll likely have questions that have very specific answers that will save you a lot of trouble. Questions like, how do you find the right clients? Or how do the right clients come across your work? When you're building your portfolio, what do you put in your portfolio? How do you build a strong portfolio? Should you specialise? Do you niche down? And if so, to what extent? How do you get those first projects to place in your portfolio? Another question many designers have is, do I have to start out at an agency or as an in-house designer? Or can I start as a freelancer straight out of the gate? So I've been freelancing successfully for some time now. I love what I do. I think most of my clients like my work. And most importantly, I'm paying the bills. My business is running smoothly. Hopefully this class will prepare you, give you some actionable, practical advice that you can start implementing now. The class project will be a little bit of a show and tell, so please use that as an opportunity to network, to get some constructive feedback on your work. So I look forward to helping you plan for freelance success. So which route should you take? Really, that's a personal decision, and it's different for each designer. Rather than tell you which route to take, so whether you head to a design agency to start out, work in-house, or start straight off as a freelance designer, let's consider some of the principles, the pros and cons of each approach, and then you're in a position to make an informed decision yourself. So let's go through these together. First of all, an in-house designer. So an in-house designer is working for usually a single brand as part of a design team. Depending on the size of a brand, you can imagine a company like Uber or Google are going to have a massive in-house team. But of course, you're working on just that one brand identity. So you're always going to be within the same confines and boundaries. Even if you were part of the identity design team, you're going to get great experience for that specific industry or even niche. But sometimes the extent of your experience will be limited. So just to weigh up a few of the specific pros and cons. So starting with the pros, an in-house designer has the opportunity to get great experience and really get to know a particular industry very well. So you might find you become a specialist. If you worked, for example, in a particular corporate sector, as an in-house designer, you'd find future work within that sector much easier to obtain because you know the industry inside out. Another advantage, you're going to usually have access to a wider range of tasks. So you'd be working for the one brand, but you may be called upon to do some fairly diverse work. If you're working on the branding, that's likely to be larger in scope than if you were working at an agency. Another advantage is there's usually opportunity in-house to branch out. So if you worked in a particular field and you wanted to branch out to learn something slightly different, there's usually more flexibility to do that in-house. You can add to your skill set and perhaps expand your disciplines. And the last advantage, you're getting to know that specific industry very well. So what are some of the disadvantages of working as an in-house designer? Well, because you're working just for one brand, you're usually going to be limited to working with a set brand identity with boundaries and rules. So you're not going to have the same creative freedom you would at an agency or as a freelance designer. Another disadvantage, if you're working at a smaller in-house company, the team is likely to be smaller. So that means less networking opportunities with other designers. And one last disadvantage, and this isn't true of all in-house design roles, but if you're in-house at a smaller company or brand, you might stunt your ideas generation. If you're constantly designing things with the same colors, the same fonts, you're not going to be as well prepared to freelance and come up with solutions for different brands each project. Now again, that's to be taken with a pinch of salt. Some in-house roles really do afford you a great deal of freedom, and there's a lot of versatility there. But for the most part, if you're working as an in-house designer, you're going to have less exposure to different identities, different styles. So what are some of the advantages of working with an agency if you go down that route? Well, usually there's a great variety of projects, different brands, different styles you'll get to work on. So it's really good to jump into a project, get to grips with a brand, create deliverables for that brand, and then you'll move on to another project. Usually from week to week, you may jump between a few projects. So that's very similar to the kind of workflow you might have as a freelance designer. So in that sense, working at an agency is good preparation for freelancing. Another advantage of working at an agency, you're often presented very quickly with new challenges. So as part of your team, you might be assigned to work on something you could in no way complete yourself. But you learn from other members of the team. It's a great way to get experience to increase your skill level. Another advantage of working at an agency is you're working alongside lots of fellow creatives. So you're going to be networking the whole time. You may be building friendships and relationships that are going to help you later on in your design career. And the last advantage, there are some real similarities to working as a freelance designer, because an agency is not working for just one brand. You're taking on different clients each month, and you're often having to jump between projects. So that's really good experience, because freelancing, likely you'll be doing something similar. You may work on just one big project for a number of months, but likely you may be taking on a few projects at a time, and at an agency you're really going to learn to manage and juggle a number of overlapping projects. So that's good experience. So lastly, what are the pros and cons of freelancing straight out of the gate? Well, let's look at the pros first. Of course, you're going to have more freedom. So freedom to choose the clients you work with, freedom to choose when you get the work done, freedom to choose how much work you take on. You'll be your own boss. Another great advantage is the flexibility this gives you. So it's much more likely to fit in with your lifestyle. And the last advantage, but perhaps some view this as a disadvantage, is that you get to deal with your clients directly. So if you're a good communicator, you're going to enjoy that. You won't be going through an account handler. You get to really speak to and connect with your own clients, which means you build relationships, and hopefully those clients will keep coming back to you in the future. Some of the disadvantages of working as a freelancer. So pressure. You're going to have to be your own boss, but that comes with responsibility. You've got to do the administration. You've got to be the account handler. You've got to be the social media marketer. All the roles of running a business would now fall on your shoulders. So some can handle that pressure comfortably. Others prefer to have someone else look after that, at least initially in their career. Another potential disadvantage is that, of course, you have no fixed salary. So when projects come in, that's fantastic. Likely you're going to earn more money than you would in-house working an agency. But when you have quiet periods where there's not a project, well then you're not being paid for those periods. You're also not going to get holiday or sick pay. So that's a disadvantage to consider. Something else I want to mention when you're starting out as a freelancer, and particularly if you decide to do this having just self-taught or come out of college or university, is the importance of honesty. So when you're meeting a client, when they're weighing up what you're going to do for them in this project, be honest about your abilities, be honest about the time frame. Don't promise the world and then disappoint your client if you can't deliver. Clients will usually appreciate you being honest, just taking things slowly with them, listening to what they need, and honestly appraising where you're able to help them. Another question you may have as a freelancer is what to charge. You want to build your portfolio. You're probably not comfortable to charge what you'd like to charge when you've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, but you don't want to undervalue yourself either. So we'll consider that in a future video. So, which route should you take? If you're not ready to make that decision yet, please keep watching, and hopefully by the end of this class, if you're not ready to start as a freelancer, you'll at least clearly see the route you need to take, and then you can set some goals to get there. But if you are ready to start now, then let's jump into the next video. So, what is the law of attraction? Well, simply put, it's the idea that in order to sell something, you have to first show it. So what kind of work would you like to do in the future? Do you have a particular style of design? If someone hired you to do a design job, what would you want it to be? What kind of style would you want it to have? Do you want to be hired to work on luxury brands? Would you prefer to work on brands that are a little more art and crafty? Well, it's good to analyze this. Align your portfolio to what you're hoping to do in future, and by doing that, the kind of work you're putting out there is going to attract the same. So first of all, and even if you've not really started doing this yet, so as a freelancer, especially initially, you might have to be prepared to be quite versatile in the roles you carry out for projects. Particularly if you're looking after a client, you want to be able to look after as many of their needs as possible. But in the sense of what you put in your portfolio, you want that to hint that you have a specialization. And to be honest, you'll want to develop a specialization in the future. So for example, is it likely a corporate firm of solicitors who want new brand identity are going to come to you if they see that in your portfolio you've done some really impressive work, but it's been art and crafty? It's been for local market stalls, or it's been for bohemian coffee shops. It's got a very relaxed, funky vibe, but it would be completely wrong for the corporate sector. If they look in your portfolio and all they see are examples of the arty stuff, it's unlikely they're then going to hire you to work on a corporate project. So although there's some flexibility with that, you'll find you're going to again attract what you're showing. So if you're hoping to score corporate jobs, then try to align your portfolio in a way that that's what you're showing. So to give you some examples of different styles, and this may well be the way the mind of a client thinks if they're looking at examples of your work, perhaps they see it as being luxurious. Maybe they see it being urban, gritty. Maybe it has a kind of high-tech vibe to it. Maybe it looks bohemian, crafty. These are all examples of a way clients may think when they look at your portfolio. So try to come up with some categories yourself, and we're going to look at this in a later video, how we can apply this when we're building your portfolio. So in order to do this successfully, you need to decide which kind of clients would I like to work with. Now, you can't be too specific. If you say I only want to work with solicitors, you may be missing out on a lot of business. But if you say I'd like to work with corporate firms in the professional sectors, so medical companies, legal companies, then you're opening yourself up to a broader category, but they have a certain look and feel that's in common. So think of what categories of business you may want to work in. I chose early on to work with photographers and fellow creatives. So I found photographers are a great type of company to work with. They often really appreciate creativity. There's a relaxed feel to their brands, but some of them wanted quite a high-end, luxurious vibe to their work. So if possible, try to decide which kind of clients would benefit best from the style that feels natural to you. So if you've worked on a few different projects and you feel you really naturally lean towards doing very nice, crisp, clean, corporate identity projects, then think of the clients that would benefit from that natural style you have. Now again, you've got to be versatile as a designer. You can't say I only work in luxury and there's no other type of design I can do. But as a freelancer, looking at what kind of work we're attracting to ourselves, it's good to pick something and to specialize and become really good at that. So as a rule of thumb, I think narrow the focus as far as you dare. And some have done this with great success. I know of designers who have literally picked a specific type of business to work with, and they've worked with just those companies, but they've become known as the go-to designer in that industry. So be careful initially, don't narrow the focus too much, but you might benefit from really highlighting yourself as someone who specializes. So I thought it might be helpful to see how I've tried to do this myself. Now I'm not claiming to have made the perfect balance, but hopefully if we look through my portfolio and the kind of message, the style I've tried to put out there, you can judge for yourself how narrow I've made that focus. So as mentioned, I thought it might be helpful just to have a look through my own website and the way I've put this in place. So looking at my portfolio page, you'll notice these aren't exactly the same type of businesses. We've got a mixture of different brands here. We've got photographers, event companies, a corporate company, a very high-end luxury brand. But what hopefully ties these brands together is the fact they're all high-end. And as we now flip through the different categories, the brand identity, hopefully you see similarities in the style. So it's all high-end. Whichever business it is, it has a luxury, minimalist feel. So you don't have to show only photographers or only corporate companies, but I've chosen to show only those businesses on this portfolio that tie in with the look and feel I'm trying to achieve. So I've tried to get the balance right between showing that I have a specialization, showing there's a kind of consistent style to my work. So if clients come to me, they know what to expect. I know what they're looking for. But I've also tried not to alienate anyone specifically. Okay, so what are the principles behind a strong portfolio? Well, really, this video follows on from some of the principles we just considered in the video Law of Attraction. So really, as a client browses your work, whether they recognize it consciously or not, they usually have a mental checklist they're going through. So they want to see examples that come as close as possible to the end outcome they're hoping for. Now, some clients don't know what they want, but usually, at least in a broad sense, someone will look through your portfolio, and if you have an example that they feel they'd be happy for you to present them, then they're going to feel confident working with you. So in this class, we're going to try to get into your client's head, to anticipate some of the thoughts and feelings they might have, and then we'll carefully design your portfolio to reassure them as they look through. So before they even contact you, they're going to feel they're in safe hands just from looking through your work. So it's worth noting, this is very different to the strategy a design agency may use. They have broad teams made up of different individuals, so they may not want to specifically align themselves to a particular style or sector. Some of them do, but as a freelancer, really you want to put a bit of individuality out there. You want to be versatile, but you want to reassure a particular kind of client you can do a great job, rather than broadly make a wider number of businesses think you might be able to do a good job. So best to really impress a smaller group than not really hit the target with a larger group. So if possible, from this lesson onwards, try to share in the class project. So as we're going through these points, use it, if possible, to update your own portfolio. Please share it with the class in the section below. And let's make this a bit of a show and tell. So comment on each other's portfolios. I'll try to comment if possible. And hopefully, between following some of the ideas in this class and getting feedback from others, we can really strengthen and level up your portfolio. So please download, if possible, a Word document I've made as a resource. So please download a copy of that, or just create your own from what we're discussing. And hopefully what you're going to end up with is a checklist you can run through as you're analysing your portfolio. Now this won't be the same for all of us. We're going to ask you to really tailor this to the kind of client you want to attract. Okay, so once you've downloaded the checklist, please resume the video, and you'll notice the first question on the checklist is, what style are my clients looking for? So again, we mentioned this briefly in a previous video, but in a general sense, do you want to attract clients who are looking for luxury branding or something a little more economical? Does it align itself to a bohemian look or a very corporate look? Try to categorize without it being too specific, just for general feeling of your work. So you'll see once you've chosen the style of your work, we've got a score for each of these questions. So once you've decided on that, look through your portfolio. So for example, with mine, if I've got lots of luxury projects shown, and then there's one I've done for a brand who really wanted to attract a budget conscious customer, that's probably going to lower the score of my portfolio, and it would raise alarm bells in the head of a client who's just wanting to have a luxury brand developed. So next, what industry or sector are your target clients in? So again, is it industrial, construction companies perhaps, corporate and professional sectors, creative companies, photographers, artisans, or perhaps it's fashion, food and beverage, whichever industry categories, try to specify and see if you can align your portfolio to those general industries. So now another important factor, what scale of business are you hoping to work with? Because it's quite unlikely, if you're hoping to work with large multinational companies and your portfolio shows small local businesses, that you're going to reassure and score those big companies. By the same token, if you're hoping to work with small local businesses and you go to your local greengrocers and you show them a portfolio where you've worked for big name brands, you're probably going to scare them away. They may assume you're not the right fit for them, even if you were willing to price yourself fairly. So try to determine the size, again in fairly general terms. Small businesses, sole traders, medium-sized businesses, and then the larger enterprises. So now some more general questions, and we'll start with what should be an obvious one. Is this my best work? Now I say it should be obvious, sometimes it's not. It's better not to put something in your portfolio just to tick a particular box than to show a bad example. So ask yourself, would I be proud to present this to a future client? If this was a project I just completed, would the client be happy if this was the result? Now if you feel you could do better or this isn't your strongest work, just leave it out. Less is more. Another piece of general advice for your portfolio, don't just show the end result. Make sure the end result is featured and that's what you see first. But if possible, explain the brief, go into a little bit behind the scenes. If someone looks a little deeper, let them get a sense of your process. What led you to make these design decisions? And for some clients, that's really important. And they may actually hire you on the basis of liking your process, the fact they can understand the way you're thinking, as well as the end project. And then lastly, and again, perhaps this should be an obvious question, but would you want to work for a similar client in the future? You hated working on, you didn't enjoy it, you'd never want to work for that kind of company again, then why show it in your portfolio? You may attract more of the same. So try to show examples of work that you enjoyed doing or that you'd be happy to do in future. So please go through the checklist, score your portfolio, perhaps give it marks out of 10, and see are there changes you can make to your portfolio to give it a higher score. And you can test this, and I'm sure you're going to find the higher a score you give your portfolio with that checklist, the better the results you're going to see, because this is very close to the way clients think, particularly those first 4 points. So mainly clients are looking for similarities. They want to see things that signal you're going to be able to handle their project. They're able to find what they're looking for just through browsing your portfolio. So the first 4 points on that checklist, those are things a client usually subliminally notices. And the last few points, well, those are things you've got to analyze yourself. In summary, a portfolio is only as strong as the weakest item you show. Often what will stick in someone's mind is something that raises alarm bells as much as a piece they really liked. So if you think something's weak, leave it out of your portfolio. So if in doubt, leave it out. Now, lastly, we'll just touch on this. How do you show your portfolio? So obviously, if you're able to create a simple website, that's going to be more impressive, especially presenting yourself as a freelancer, trying to come across as a professional business. See if you can put a simple website together. So maybe use a site like Squarespace, possibly even Wix. And you can actually put a very professional website together on Behance. So those are some options to create a professional looking portfolio, and that's sure to attract a better standard of work. Okay, so pricing. How do you structure your prices? How should you charge? Should you charge a set price or hourly? Well, the answer depends on the situation. Sometimes you will want to charge an hourly rate, but one thing's for sure, you'll want to pay careful attention to your pricing. You'll want to have given this a lot of thought, calculated it carefully beforehand. And as always, we're going to consider some principles that will allow you to apply this to your specific situation and to your clients. So let's go over some of the principles together. So first of all, you need to be aware of your competition. What are others with a similar ability to you charging to do this? Now, you can look around online, but I suggest not basing your prices solely on crowdsourcing sites or open job market sites, sites like Fiverr or People Per Hour. Depending on the region of the world, that's going to give you a very mixed range of abilities, and some lowering and lowering their prices just to beat the competition. So maybe look at local designers, those that live around you, or those that are going to have access to a similar market as you. Maybe do some secret shopping. Try to find out what they're charging and what clients are prepared to pay them. Then, of course, work out your own costs. So I don't just mean what you'd like to earn per hour. As a freelancer, you've got to take into account the overheads of an office if you have one, equipment you might need to refresh each year, software you need licenses for. There are numerous costs now associated with your business, and while the hourly rate can sound quite tempting at first, you really need to make sure you're accounting for those things. You'll also want to make sure you're charging enough to give yourself holiday pay and possibly sick pay, although let's hope that's not necessary. So time is money. If you're charging a set price to do a task, you want to make sure you're fairly compensated for your time. So of course, if you're doing something for the first time or you're less familiar with it, there's going to be some leeway there. Perhaps you end up undercharging for the odd job, or you overcharge for some others. But in general, try to do your research, at least roughly estimate how long something will take you, and make sure what you charge is going to be fair. Make sure you're not working for nothing. So you'll also want to be prepared to give your client some ballpark figures. So if someone approaches you, they want you to design a poster for them, or a new logo, a brand identity, they'll want some idea of what this is going to cost and likely how long it's going to take. So again, honesty is good. If you're not 100% sure, give them at least a fair estimate, and say to them, depending on how long this process takes, it could be between this figure and that figure. But please be prepared to give them some ballpark figures. They'll want to know whether it's within their budget or not, and if they're prepared to pay you. If you simply say to someone, I'm going to charge hourly, this is my hourly rate, and I think it should take around so many hours, but then it actually takes you twice that time, you're going to have a very unhappy client. So whichever way you decide to give them a rough estimate, make sure if you are going to go over budget, you let them know as early as possible, and give them choice. Make sure they can decide whether you spend a little longer, or whether perhaps they have less options created for them, so that it stays within budget. So that's quite important to keep the client happy when they pay you that final balance. And lastly, when do you charge hourly? When do you charge a set price? Well, that really depends. Personally, I like to charge a set price for something I'm familiar with, a larger project that the client would be very daunted to have an open hourly rate. So if I'm doing a front-end web design project, or perhaps front-end web design combined with brand identity, we can be talking a lot of money. So a client will want to know I'm committing to do this at a certain price. And I'll detail how many revisions I'm going to include, how many concepts I'm going to create, and I put that in a contract. So both sides know what their investment is, and hopefully you keep things on budget. If you're doing updates or small bits and pieces, then it's reasonable to charge an hourly rate. I would say anything you expect to take in the region of 5 hours or less, you can't always give an accurate final figure. So for me, that's an occasion where I'll say to the client, this will take a few hours, and we agree an hourly rate. So hopefully this gives you some ideas, and you can start calculating your own pricing structure. So while we're talking about pricing, something related to that is your workload. Now you've got to work out your pricing to cover your costs and expenses. Will you be able to freelance full-time immediately? Well, maybe you can't. It might be at first you're only able to generate enough work to fill, let's say, 2 days a week. Well, if that's the case, my suggestion is try to find something else to support you. Don't raise your prices so that 2 days a week you're charging enough to pay yourself 5 days a week. That's probably going to result in an unhappy client, and you'll be overcharging. So instead, why not try to find something part-time if you can, in as closely related a business as possible. So if you could find some other design venture part-time, brilliant. Then you're gaining experience and you're able to focus for that set period of time on your freelance work. And it gives you less stress, more flexibility of your pricing. So that's something I did. I worked for a photography agency for a number of years. I built some really useful contacts, learnt how to run a business, but it also gave me great freedom, evenings, weekends, and a few days a week to focus on my freelance projects. So with the two together, I was able to take that initial plunge into freelancing without the panic and the pressure of earning a full-time salary right off the bat. So hopefully you'll find something that works for you along those lines. As I say, if you could perhaps work part-time for a design agency or an in-house gig, perfect. Even if it's slightly unrelated, try to make it an industry sector that you'd like to work within. So just as I did that with photography, and I now work at branding and building websites for photographers, perhaps you could work part-time for solicitors if you wanted to work with corporate and legal firms. Or if you'd like to do design for food and beverage or retail, there's no shame in getting some experience in that industry, learning how it actually works, and then your design is going to be better in the long run. So that's a less glamorous reality of freelancing, but sometimes it is a hard reality. You can't always afford to freelance full-time with nothing else to support you right from the get-go. So do what it takes, but put your heart and soul into your work. Make sure you're pricing fairly, that you're being compensated when you are doing that design work, and hopefully that gives you the template for future success. Okay, so how do you score the right clients? And let's consider some of the prerequisites to this stage. So if you've watched the previous videos, we've looked at how to identify the right client for you. Who is it you want to attract? What kind of projects do you want to work on in future? Ensuring that portfolio is going to reassure and really make that specific target clientele be attracted to you naturally. The rule of attraction. Show the kind of work you want to attract more of in future. And then lastly, we've just looked at pricing. So how to structure your pricing competitively. So once you have those things in place, how do you actually go out and start getting those clients? Well, you'll need an action plan to do that. So the key is you either want to know where to go to find those clients, or you need to make sure, ideally, you've positioned yourself somewhere that they're going to be looking. So what are some practical steps you can take? And again, principles to achieve this. So number one, find out where your target audience will be looking. So if you want to break into the construction industry, you're looking to do brand identity for construction firms, where do they look? Are they the kind of people that will Google online? Will they look through Pinterest for ideas before they engage a company to do their brand identity? Would they shop around on Instagram, looking at hashtags? Will they look through industry-specific magazines? How then do you get yourself visible at these places? Do you need to work on your social media presence? Make sure that your work appears for certain hashtags? Well, possibly, and that's worked for some designers. If they're Google searches, can you do a paid AdWords campaign? Or can you work on your SEO to make sure that, if not nationwide, at least for a specific area, maybe your local area, you rank for logo design in construction for your town? So apply that principle to your target audience, to your local area, and try to get yourself seen by the right people. It's much more effective to be found by those looking for you than it is to approach or even cold call companies. But that is something you could do. So by all means, try to set up appointments, look for companies that might need your services, and go for it. Pitch to them. Either give them a call, pop in and visit them if they're local. Sometimes you'd be surprised what taking the initiative can achieve. The next principle is that really you've got to be prepared to spend money to make money. Now, it's true you might end up using something like social media, which doesn't cost anything if you're not doing paid ads, and that might snowball and work for you. Maybe you manage to get a name for yourself in a certain industry, and it hasn't cost you a penny. Well, that's excellent. But for most of us, we've got to be prepared to spend something to have a marketing budget. So work out what you're prepared to spend, what kind of return you'd like for that, and rather than spend that entire budget in one big splash, why not test smaller amounts? So large enough to see if it's worked or not, but small enough that you've not spent your whole budget for the year on one big idea. So for example, you could try some paid social media ads. Try to learn that. There are plenty of videos out there to show you how to target a specific audience and demographic. So put some money aside, spend that money on that marketing and see what the return is. If that works, see if you can do more of it until you reach the volume of work you're looking for. If that hasn't worked, or even if it has, try something else. Try doing some Google AdWords marketing. Try doing some SEO. You might even be able to do that to a certain extent by yourself. But try these different avenues of marketing, measure the results, and start to build up this almost an index of what works for you. That means if you have a quiet period in future, you can go back to that index and, well, if I spend this much money, I can expect more or less this kind of return for it. Now, unless you do that, really, you're just going to be hoping and praying each month that the work you need comes in. And none of us really want to be in that position. So try to come up with some paid strategies. Even if you eventually don't need them, it's really good to have them there under the desk to pull out when needed. So a third principle, often before people actually look to hire someone to do a design job, they look for inspiration. And sometimes that's to then instruct the designer. And often if someone hires me to do a project, they send me a link to a Pinterest board they've created. So whose work are they pinning? Well, sometimes interestingly it will be my own work. Sometimes they'll screenshot things from Instagram. Sometimes they'll Google search. So again, look into this. Look into hashtags and keywords. And again, this is where it really benefits you to pick a specific target audience. Because then for that specific niche and perhaps area, you can have a chance of getting your work out there, getting it seen. So that's a fantastic position to be in. If someone thinks your work inspires them, that may lead them to actually contact you to work on their project. So see if it's possible to do that. And lastly, although this is something that takes time to build momentum, word of mouth is so powerful, and reputation. You really can't understate the importance of growing a reputation in your industry. So whichever area of graphic design you specialize in, even if you have quite versatile roles, you want to build relationships with people, always leave a client with a good feeling. Try to leave them with a positive view of you. Even if that means giving them a little extra, going the extra mile for them, that always pays off in the long run. Just try to genuinely care for people, look after your clients, and they'll usually look after you in return. They'll either come back to you with repeat business, or they might recommend you to their friends. So really, this should be an important part of your business marketing efforts. It's a passive part, and if you're doing your job the right way, naturally it's going to have a snowball effect. So really invest in your clients, treat them well, leave them feeling positive thoughts about you, and they're going to come back and look after you in the end. So word of mouth, referrals, that's really lifeblood to a freelance designer. You want to grow your network of clients as quickly as you can. And so speaking of networking, we're going to look at that specifically in the following video. You may be able to get more out of your existing network than you realize. So how do you get the most out of your existing network? And I stress the word existing because this isn't necessarily about new networking opportunities. There's probably networking opportunities that you can take advantage of right now, people you already know that are part of your life who could really help you with your freelance career. And sometimes it just requires thinking laterally. So who do you know that might be able to help you to get that next client, or to have a very useful project in your portfolio? So first of all, don't just think of creatives you know. If you know creatives, by all means reach out to them, and maybe you can collaborate on a project or be introduced to a new client. But think of those who perhaps work in an industry you'd like to break into. So again, in principle, this could apply to any industry. But if you wanted to work in the construction industry, you wanted to do maybe quite almost brutalist corporate style branding, and you thought the construction industry is right for me, but how do I break into this? Or maybe you've got an uncle, maybe your dad has a friend. In your personal network, just ask your parents, ask your siblings, ask your uncles, ask your aunts, do you know someone in this industry? And the chances are you're going to get some feedback from that. Now, when you find these connections, and obviously the closer they are to you, the better, reach out to them. Offer maybe to do something either at a reduced price, or if you're really starting out, ask to do something. Allow them to see if they like it or not. And you could do it pro bono if you have to. If you really think having this project is going to be a centerpiece for your portfolio, and it's going to help you start to gain a presence designing for a particular industry. So that's a personal decision. Myself, I don't like to work for free, but if you really think this might help you to get a foothold, and you're doing it to help out a friend or a friend of a friend, there's no shame in offering to do something to help them out. So that's one way you might break in to an industry using your existing connections. If you're not already on social media, then it goes without saying, build your online presence. So try to have accounts on all the popular social media channels. Make sure you're on Instagram. Post regularly, engage with people. Just try to take advantage of every opportunity, whether that's on Facebook, engaging with friends you went to school with, old work colleagues. Just keep in touch with people. Let them see occasionally, without bombarding them, let them see posts, let them see what you're working on. You'll be amazed what can come of that. Just make people aware, while respecting their privacy. Make them aware of what you're doing, and perhaps your existing online network is going to help you. There's also some networking opportunities that take a little bit of initiative. So for example, local networking groups. So I've tried that. It was really good, brought a lot of business in. I didn't need to do it in the end, so I've stopped now. But if you find a local business networking group, that can be a great way not only to find new clients for yourself. You'd be amazed at the clients you might have access to that you share with other professionals. So by helping others, by putting them in touch with people they can work with, they'll be looking for opportunities to pay you back. So that's a very powerful kind of networking. Also, your clients, if you're working on a design project for them and they need one of these other professionals, if you've done good networking, you're going to be able to recommend them someone to help. So you could recommend a copywriter, you can recommend an accountant. It makes you seem more of a professional yourself by growing that network. So definitely consider doing some form of business networking. Industry shows can be another great way to network. So that's not so much existing networking. Again, this is something proactive. But if you want to break into a specific sector, consider going to trade shows for that industry. Sometimes you can even pay to have a display stand and pitch your particular service to them. But find out where people in the industry you want to be involved with, where they go, where they look for partners, for business partners, and try to get yourself there. One last suggestion, if you're someone that loves coffee, like I do, don't just grab a coffee and leave a coffee shop. Bring your laptop with you, sit there, let others in the coffee shop kind of get to know your face, let them see some of your work. You'd be amazed who might lean over to you and say, "Oh, I've just noticed what you're doing there. I actually need that." Or who you might get chatting to. Just try to be friendly. Treat everyone as, I suppose, a prospective client. Even if nothing comes of it, you'll feel better just being a sociable person. And at best, you might pick up a client or two from doing that. So how to pitch and win. So this isn't me giving you my advice as a marketing expert or someone who's extremely good at pitching. This is coming from someone who felt very nervous to pitch to clients at first. I remember going to my first meetings and I was tense, I was uptight, but a few secrets helped me. Some of these I learned early on, some I've picked up over the years, but I want to share these with you. And hopefully it will help you to relax more pitching, and definitely it's going to improve your chances of success. So first of all, when you go to pitch to a client, whether that's a face-to-face meeting or perhaps a Skype or an initial phone call, rather than worrying about getting the job, try to focus yourself on meeting that client's needs, like really understanding them. So listen actively, repeat key things they say back to them. Show that you're really engaged, you're really understanding what they're saying to you. And then that's going to lead you to naturally ask relevant questions. You're going to give yourself a better picture of what that client needs, how you can solve any problems they might have, and how you can meet their needs. I think naturally, if you feel someone really gets you, they hear what you're saying, they're coming back with intelligent comments, you begin to feel more confident. They're going to be able to take care of things for you. If someone's just prepared a sales pitch and they're reeling at you what they're going to do for you and why you should hire them, to be honest, that doesn't inspire much confidence. And you wonder, do they really care about me? Are they listening to me at this meeting? So for me, that's the key piece of advice. Listen to your clients. When you go to the meeting, have the aim of saying, really don't pitch to them. So the key to a perfect pitch is not to pitch, it's to listen and just come back and respond to them. And if you do it the right way, it's going to flow naturally. They will have questions. If you've listened, you're going to be able to give them good answers. Another key, I think, to pitching successfully, again, honesty. So if there's something you're not sure you can do, just say it. Be honest, say, well, I'll do some research into that, or I have a few ideas, but I'd really like to spend some time and come back to you. People will appreciate that. If you try to blag it, if you try to just spin them something, come up with something clever on the spot, particularly if they know what they're talking about, they'll realize what you've done and you've probably ruined the pitch. They're not going to trust you. So honesty, a very important part of pitching. In line with honesty, I think as a rule of thumb, I like to under-promise and over-deliver. So it doesn't mean play down what you're going to do for the client, but don't promise the world and you've set your client's expectations so high that they're going to be left potentially feeling shortchanged if you can't follow through on this grand picture you've painted. Instead, just promise them what they need, promise within reason, and then go the extra mile. When it comes to the project, impress them, over-deliver. So that communication is so important, listening to the client's needs, but of course you will want to share something with them. So share relevant examples of your own work. Try to resist the temptation to just show them anything, whatever you have on hand. Less is more. Show one project you really feel that client will appreciate, rather than show 3 projects that are maybe a little disjointed or not relevant to that client. Now, what if you don't have a project that you feel is the perfect fit for that client? What if this is a new client and a new industry, perhaps even a new style of design that you're sure you can do? Perhaps you've practiced and done it, but you want to do this for a paid client now. Well, find examples of similar projects that you haven't done. Don't claim they're yours. Show them to the client and say, I found these things online. I love them. I love the style. I love the vibe. I really want to do something similar. I want to add this to my portfolio. I'm confident I can do that for you. Again, honesty is refreshing. If you pitch that way to a client, they're probably going to want to give you that chance to add this piece you're desperate to add to your portfolio. You've got to balance that with, not using the client as a guinea pig. That's not going to inspire confidence in anyone. But if it's a slight leap forward for you, it's something a little new, just be honest about it, show your enthusiasm, and the client will probably be happy to let you do that for them. And another important detail, do your homework before the meeting. So there's nothing worse than going to meet a client and you don't know the first thing about them, their business. That would be a schoolboy error. Do your homework. Try to find out as much about their business and industry as you can before you meet them, without stalking them, of course. And lastly, don't be afraid to discuss the terms of business. So, creative ideas are one thing, understanding their needs, but make sure you go over the terms. So if you're offering design revisions, set realistic expectations for them. How many revisions are you going to include in the quote you give them? What would be the cost if they need some extra revisions or extra concepts? Will you have a contract with them? I hope you're going to have a contract, or at least terms and conditions. So make them aware you'll be sending a contract across. Will you ask for a deposit? When will the balance be due? Discuss these things. Don't be embarrassed about them. They're not going to weaken your pitch. They're actually going to make you seem more professional and inspire confidence in your client. So some essential best practice for running a business. And if you're now freelancing, you haven't run a business before, some of these ideas may be new to you. Whatever you do, don't skip this video. This is an important part of freelancing successfully. So you're now going to be the bookkeeper, the possibly accountant, the accounts handler, the marketing director, the administrator. You're going to wear many different hats in running your business. And these are some practical tips. This won't be an extensive guide of how to do these things, but here's some things to note down and a few tips that are going to help you to do this professionally. So first of all, contracts. Don't, even for the small jobs, think this means an extra step to booking the project in. Please make sure you draw up a contract. If you don't want to have a solicitor do that, then at least find a template online and customize it. Just make sure you have something in writing that you and the client agree to. It's really important to do that. Even from a legal standpoint, if your contract gives transfer of copyright to the extent you're happy to give it to your client after a job, without that, they could have trouble in future using the work you've designed for them. So you really need to get a contract in place. So perhaps at the same time as asking for the contract to be signed, you ask for some form of deposit or down payment on a project. Now I think that's perfectly reasonable. That's something I've been doing for years now. I won't start a project unless it's for a very reputable, larger corporate firm without some kind of deposit. To me, it means you're sharing the risk. Even if a client has some reservations, about they've not met you before, this is your first project together, how do they know you'll give them what they want? Well, you haven't met them either, and you're about to spend a considerable amount of time, if it's a larger project, trying to solve their design problem. And they're the judge in that particular case. You could do an amazing award-winning job and they could decide, this isn't for me, actually I'd rather not pay you. So a contract and taking a non-refundable deposit will protect you from that. At least then you're partially covered for the time you'll spend. And again, if a client's serious about working with you and respects you as a professional, this is something they should be prepared to do. So in terms of managing your workflow, I highly recommend using business management software if you can. Now I found something called Light Blue. I managed to customize that and it fits perfectly for my needs as a designer. That manages my workflow, calendar. I can get contracts digitally signed. It comes across as very professional when a client is sent items that are generated by this. It's got a crisp professional edge to it, but also it saves you so much time and admin. So definitely look into that. and perhaps you can comment and share any business management tools that you've used successfully over the years. So another tip is to manage your workload and your max workload. Now, it's easy to feel, especially when you're enthusiastic about starting out, you just want to take as much work as you can. The phone rings, an email comes in, yes, yes, yes. Don't book too many projects. You will burn out, and there's nothing worse than working through too many projects at once and feeling you're not able to give each project what it deserves. Your clients are putting a lot of faith in you. As a professional, you've got to know what your limits are. Don't take on more than you can comfortably fit at any one time. Even if that means potentially missing out on a project you'd like to have worked on. See if they're willing to wait. Try to shuffle things around, but do set a cap. It's not professional to take on too much work and then produce a substandard result. Another tip is to look into fonts and also stock images. So look into this. If you don't know this already, look at the way they're licensed, your obligations as far as licensing them, and how you can get them licensed on behalf of a client. And make the client aware of this before you start a project. If possible, make sure it's a part of your contract that they're responsible for certain parts of the licensing. Now, if you don't do that, let's say you design something that looks amazing, you use a font that's included in the Adobe suite, and you present this to your client, but they thought they would be able to reproduce this themselves in future, and they suddenly realize they need a license that they don't have. That's going to make you look stupid to the client. It might make them angry. They'll wonder why you didn't make them aware of this before. And the same for stock images. You can't grab things off of Google. You need to license images professionally and make sure your clients are legally covered for any licenses they use. Attempt to build relationships with your clients. View that as an important part of your marketing. So sometimes it can feel, oh, this isn't invoiceable time. Well, it's important time. You've really got to be prepared to build real human relationships. That's what's going to keep clients coming back to you. That's what will move them to recommend you with confidence to their friends. So invest in it and put some time aside. When you're working out your max workload, put time aside each week for talking to clients on the phone, for meeting them if they need to meet. You want to make sure you're available to do that. And lastly, be generous with your time by all means, but we're not talking about a sample project for a family member or friend. We spoke earlier about the way that might be a good way to break into an industry. But once you're ready to start working professionally, don't work for free. There is paid work out there. There are clients who will value what you do. Use the strategies we've discussed to find them and to make sure they can find you. Make sure you value your time. And it's a common misconception that if you're not busy enough, lower your prices until you get enough work in. It doesn't work that way. And you don't want to be competing at the bottom. Really, you want to charge a fair amount for the work you're producing and just work on your marketing techniques. The work will come, but whatever you do, don't work for free, hoping that will lead to something in future. And that also goes for work in process with paying clients. So if they request something extra and perhaps they imply or you assume they want you to do that for free, don't make them aware of the cost. Show that you respect your time, and if you respect it, they'll respect it too. Alternatively, if you don't respect your time, if you're constantly throwing in things for free, then that will become a natural expectation. They may not value it, and you're not being paid fairly for your work. So get that balance between being generous and being fairly compensated. So hopefully those are some practical business tips that you can look further into, but putting them in place is going to make sure you're set up for professionalism and success. So, are you ready to go freelance? Well, if the answer to that's no, maybe you don't feel you're quite there yet, that's okay. There's no shame in that. At least now you can make an action plan, you know where you're headed, and hopefully you can see some clear steps to get there. If you do feel you're ready to do that now, then congratulations, and I hope this short class has helped you just to start thinking about some of the ideas and principles you might want to put into place. And I hope having some honest advice from someone who's been here, who's done that before, helps you to get there in a more straightforward way, to avoid making some of the painful mistakes that others have to make in doing this successfully. So just to recap what we've learned and hopefully how that might help you. So we looked at the law of attraction. Definitely when you're building your own portfolio, and I hope you've had a chance to get involved with the class project, please work on your portfolio, share it, let's see what others think. Perhaps their feedback can help you take it to the next level. But the law of attraction, so show what you want more of. If you don't have anything to show, or use some of the advice as far as networking, taking advantage of your existing connections, and get something that's going to attract more of the same. We looked at the importance of narrowing down your target. So even though you can expect work from other industries, you can expect a range of styles you're going to have to work in, having something that feels a little more consistent, something that's going to reassure a particular type of client, it's going to make it much easier for you to attract the right kind of work. So hopefully you'll be able to identify an industry you'd like to work in, or perhaps a niche you'd like to specialise in. And that's really going to improve your chances of attracting more of the same in future. So we also looked at the importance of building a strong portfolio, and that those principles really go hand in hand together. Hopefully you're ready to work out your pricing, use the principles we considered, work out what you need to earn, consider the possibility of something else to support yourself while you're starting out freelancing. Don't be ashamed about doing that, and just make sure you're fairly compensated for the time you're spending. We looked at how you can then try to score the right kind of clients, or put yourself somewhere that they're going to come across you, that they'll notice your work. We also looked at how to pitch and win, and there's more to that than just really wanting the job. Really, you want to understand your clients' needs and assure them of that. Lastly, we looked at some vital business tips, particularly contracts, and just the fundamentals of running a business successfully that are hopefully going to save you some headaches. So it's been great sharing some of these tips and some of my experiences with you. I hope this helps you to set up your own freelance business for success. Please get in touch with the comments below, let me know what you think, and I wish you all the success in the world for the future.